good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another edition of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. And we have a lot to discuss this week, or this Tuesday, whatever it is. And what I'd love to do is start with having Representative Gomberg speak to a couple of issues, including updates from the coast, from his coastal part of the district, and a special session. So what I'll do before we get started with Representative Gomberg is remind you that we have Commissioner Olson from Yamhill County. We've got Mayor Michael Cate from Amity. We've got Mayor Beth Witowski from Dayton. We have Shannon Buckmaster from Chehalis Valley Chamber of Commerce. We have Wendy Belize from PGE. We've got Representative David Gomberg. We've got Mayor Scott Hill from McMinnville. We've got Abhisha Stone from SEDCOR. We have Lori Gilmore from the city of Yamhill. We have Diane McLaren from Chemeketa Community College. And we have Commissioner Mary Sterrett. All right, thank you very much. And Representative Gomberg, what would you like to tell people in the community?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And just a reminder, of course, that that my district stretches from Tillamook to Yachats along the Central Coast, but swings inland and picks up part of Yamhill and part of Polk County. I have the fine city of Sheridan, parts of Willamina, Grand Ronde, and Falls City, although I have to drive out of my district to get back into Falls City. I think the most significant news this afternoon is that the governor has in fact called a special session, which is scheduled to begin on the 24th. I don't have a lot of details about how that session will unfold given the unique circumstances that we have right now with distancing and health considerations, and the fact that the Capitol building is closed. I anticipate that the building will remain closed, although that they will be taking steps to ensure that there is public access to everything that's going on there, either via the large monitors that'll be placed in front of the building, or of course that all of our meetings are live streamed. We do not yet have information about how safety considerations will be applied, or in fact whether all 90 legislators will be expected to attend, or rather they will limit that to a simple quorum and allow some people who may be more vulnerable to stay home. So what are we doing in a special session? There is a list of topics that has just been released, and I would put them into three broad categories. One of them is going to be COVID related. One of them is going to deal with public safety and police accountability. And one of them is what I would term loose ends. And I don't say that to sound disrespectful, but some essential items that did not get fully addressed during the last short legislative session, which, as you all recall, ended in failure with a number of pieces of legislation that simply didn't get to the finish line because we lacked a quorum and were unable to conclude business. So those three categories of items will be considered. I believe there's about 25 bills on the list. Stay tuned for more details about what those bills entail and how we will be managing them. I think the question a lot of people will want to know is, how long does this special session last? And the answer to that is that it depends. When we are called into session like this, there are still certain requirements for public notice and timeframes. However, those notice requirements can be suspended, which is to say that we don't have to follow them if 2/3 of the members agree to waive the requirements. We don't know yet whether we will have the two-thirds vote necessary for rule suspension. If we do not, then the session could last 3 to maybe 5 or 7 days to transact the same amount of business, which could be concluded in 1 day with rule suspension. So we'll watch that with interest. This is all very new and very subject to change. So I share with you what I know as of 1:08 on Tuesday afternoon. You also asked about the circumstances out at the coast. Well, as you know, I represent portions of Tillamook County and Lincoln County, in addition to Yamhill and Polk counties. Tillamook County has been pretty stable. they've had 6 positive cases, and that has been the situation there for over a month. However, in Lincoln County, we've seen substantial change, and I shared this with you during our last meeting, that we have gone in roughly a 2-week period from having 9 positive cases to over 200 positive cases, based on at least 1 outbreak and the potential for several more. That is of great concern. I also shared with you that the testing that was done at the seafood plant where this outbreak occurred, they tested 300 people. They came back with about 120 positives. They report to us that 95% of the people they tested did not show any active symptoms. And there have been challenges getting people to stay home or not go shopping or not interact with friends or neighbors when they just simply don't feel sick. So we're waiting to learn a little bit more about how all of that evolves and whether there is an additional spread through the community. Lincoln County is at phase 1. Nobody's talking yet about reducing our status. I don't believe that would occur, but we are certainly not on track to advance to stage 2. And I think that's all relevant and important in Yamhill County because it's important to understand how quickly these situations can exponentially increase, and that you can go from 1 case to several cases to several dozen cases within a 24 or 48 hour period, especially when you are in an attractive tourism environment where people come from outside the community to visit you. I'll just conclude by saying that I think many parts of Yamhill County are like many parts of the coast in that our greatest need is also our greatest fear. Our greatest need is that we have people come in and spend money with us. Our greatest fear is that they bring infections with them or spread the virus further. So we work very hard to try and balance those two and to move forward, protecting both our economy and our healthcare at the same time. And that's going to be challenging. So that's a quick update. I apologize for making my quick update a little longer, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and thank you, Representative. I thought it was really important, not only for all of us here to hear what's happening in Lincoln County, but just as you mentioned, because we can at any moment be in a similar situation. And I've really appreciated the updates that you and Senator Gomberg have provided to the community through the e-newsletters.
Senator Roblin. Oh, thank you. You mean Senator Roblin?
Yes. Representative Gomberg, I've really appreciated your updates and those of Senator Arnie Roblin. Okay, does anybody have questions or comments or additions to Representative Gomberg's thoughts? Go for it.
Commissioner, I do. It's Mary Starrett. Thank you, Representative Gomberg. I just wanted to ask regarding the special session if there will be, or if you've heard, or if you would be interested in advocating for not restricting information as far as timing of the hearings and public comment, even if it is by written testimony.
Commissioner, I want to make sure I understand your question. I think you're asking, would I want to ensure that the public has access to the information and the process as it unfolds?
Yes, because I know, unless I misunderstood what you said about not suspending the rules in terms of information about the timing and the notice of hearing.
Well, again, I don't know. Although I have a list of topics, I don't have a list of legislative drafts to review exactly what is being proposed. For those of you that are familiar with the history of special sessions, normally the details are pretty much worked out in advance, and they are designed to go very quickly for a lot of reasons, part of which is because they are unscheduled and they're disruptive to people's lives who have jobs and other obligations, but also because they're expensive and they want to limit the amount of time that is spent going over these special issues that have drawn us together on an emergency basis. So I promise you, Commissioner, that we will make sure that the public is notified, that they know what the bills are being considered, that they know what the process they're going through, and know when they are coming for a vote, either in committee or on the floor of the House or the Senate. How much notice people will get is hard to say, and that's the bad news. The good news is that because we are operating so much more now on a remote basis, that people would have the opportunity, I believe, to testify in front of a committee remotely. Normally, you'd have to come to the Capitol to testify, and there's no opportunity to testify remotely. But now we have circumstances where if you get 2 hours notice, you can get on the phone or get in front of your computer a lot more easily than you can get to Salem. So I think there's some trade-offs there. Again, I don't want to misrepresent what's going on. I don't know what's going on yet in terms of process, but I am confident that there will be opportunities for people to know the process, know the issues, and know when people are voting on them, as well as to be able to provide feedback.
Thank you, Representative. I just want to put in a plug for as much transparency and as much adherence to the fidelity of the spirit of public input, even though we are in a different circumstance. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And I should have added earlier, one thing that is not on the agenda for the special session are budget adjustments. Originally, it was announced that budget subcommittees would be holding hearings and inviting public testimony in preparation for a special session. At this point, there are no budget adjustments on the agenda, and therefore no budget committees meeting and taking testimony on those issues. So that's something we will not be considering, even though budgets are being reduced as we speak for all state agencies.
All right, great. Thank you very much for that additional information. And thank you, Commissioner Sterrett, for encouraging and reiterating how valuable it is to have public comment. Do we have other thoughts or questions? Yes, Mayor Cape.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Gomberg. And I thought I saw on the list of topics to include one of which was CARES Act funding. Would that not need the Ways and Means or budget processes? I realized too, I think it was just a topic, so I suppose it depends on how it's set up.
Let me give you two answers to your question, Mayor. The first is that the CARES Act funding does indeed require some legislative involvement, and that has been run primarily through the Emergency Board. The Emergency Board has been meeting several times with the intent of dispersing those dollars. They were, I think, $1.4 billion in CARES funding that came to us from the federal government, and they have now allocated the lion's share of that, but there's more to go. I did not see any distribution of CARES, CARES dollars on the list for the special session, although I would need to go back and check it. One reason that we are not needing to deal with budget issues is the potential that the federal government will send more CRF dollars to us. So we don't want to make major adjustments until we know how many dollars we have coming in to offset those program cuts. So short answer, stay tuned. I can double check and see if CARES funding is on the list, but I do not recall seeing it there in the first place. You might be understandably confusing the special session allocations with emergency board actions.
Okay, great. Do you have a follow-up, Mayor, or are you good? All right. But there's a couple of mayors here. Apologies. Along those lines, since I totally neglected to actually offer Mayor Witowski her own set of comments, Mayor, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Senator or Representative Gomberg?
Not immediately. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you very much, Representative. I would love to go to Commissioner Sterrett next, if she's ready for speaking to the community and to this group.
Thank you, Commissioner Kula. Just a couple of things. I had heard from a constituent who was concerned about DHS child welfare visits to the home without PPE. So I reached out to our regional director and asked about that and wanted to square them up with some of the guidelines for employers and employees. And I was told by the regional director that the DHS caseworkers are not mandated to wear masks when visiting a home. So I just wanted to, if anybody has concerns about that they let their caseworker know that even though it's optional, that if it bothers them, that they would rather have a caseworker, use a mask or PPE and follow up on that. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for being on that. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell people here? Oh, sorry. Are there questions for Commissioner Starrett? All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
Casey, I don't have a lot for the group because I haven't been able to get out and drive for the last week or so. But everything I hear in the emails I've gotten and everything, I think everything in Yamhill County from a economic standpoint is doing well. I've heard a lot of people who are glad to be open under phase 2 and taking advantage of phase 2. I think that what the city of McMinnville and everybody's doing with closing down the main streets on the weekends and allowing more space for serving and also for retail, I think that will be a big boon to hopefully getting the economy back on track. The other thing for those that don't know, and the mayors specifically, because I'm sure you and Commissioner Starrett got it, this morning they have finalized the CRF funding and the relief, COVID relief funding for the counties and the cities in the formula. And hopefully they should, if you have an electronic bank transfer, you should be getting it within the next couple of days after you fill out their big 15-page form. It shows right now that Yamhill County is going to get about $715,000, I was believing, but then I don't know about any of the cities, but it's going to be done on like similar to the 60-40 share for counties and cities. So I think the cities can plan on that too long, within a week or so, getting their money from the COVID release fund, whatever they filed for those expenses that were eligible. A lot of counties had non-eligible expenses, and so did some cities, but I don't know. I don't have the breakdown for the cities. And I think for me, Casey, that's about it. I'll be glad when we can all start meeting together at one instead of doing these town halls. I think they're great, but it just doesn't replace a in-person meeting. So.
Well, I understand my son, who's 10, says, I wouldn't mind meeting some people and talking to them, not on Zoom. So
yeah.
You and our 7-year-old or a 10-year-old are on the same wavelength here.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to mayors and city representatives now. And I wanted to check in. Lori Gilmer is here on behalf of the city of Yamhill. And I wanted to check in to see if Lori would like to tell her community anything today. Lori might be actually doing some other work at this very moment, though. So, okay, great. What I will do is I will move on to the city of McMinnville. And Mayor Hill, what would you like to tell people in the community today with your clean-shaven face?
That's right. Thank you, Casey, and those that are on the line. It's good to be with you. As I looked over at the topics to consider, I think the first thing that I'd talk about is the increase in cases, especially around Yamhill County. Marion and Polk and Washington, Clackamas around us are having a tough time with the yellow light that's been given to stop phase 1 and phase 2 movement. But Yamhill County finds itself in, a fairly consistent place. As I look at the last report, we are sitting at 2.4 of testing coming out positive. I think Friday I shared with you, but I'll reiterate it since it's a topic, is the hospital has only dealt with 3 COVID cases through the whole pandemic so far. Unfortunately, last week we had a death at the Willamette Valley Hospital, an individual, a male that was 68, but there was circumstances outside of COVID that made that individual vulnerable. Hospital has PPE, they're fully staffed, they're moving forward. Elective surgeries are moving forward. And again, Lori indicated to us that they're doing about 30 tests per day. Citizens are not able to go out and have testing. It's only through a doctor that you'd be able to be tested. With that being said, I think all of you received information from Jodi Christensen last night about the governor's direction as we're getting closer to the 4th of July to stay fairly local. And I think the thing that I would share with individuals is how critical that we should not have this false sense of security. Masks are necessary, gloves are necessary. And if you're not feeling well, that you quarantine yourself to your home. I think those are the things that are helping us tremendously. And as we move to the opportunity to possibly close 3rd Street and have wine tasting rooms and restaurants move out to the road, again, our intent is to continue to follow the state's guidelines of physical distancing. You know, as we met Friday, Councillor Drabkin talked to us about last Tuesday at our council meeting, where we made a statement from the council that would be supportive of Black Lives Matter movement. And we shared with individuals that we're looking internally to make sure that we are truly aware and doing the training and doing self-examination within the city so that we don't add to the concerns that would be out there. A week from today, we're going to have our next council meeting. We'll be going over the budget. We've heard a lot of citizens talk to us about this defunding the police department, and we have talked about that, and we're going to take a little bit of a look at our budgeting given the COVID situation, but we are very well into that process. And to derail our budget at this point, and to we have statutory limits to get that budget passed, as all of you do that are with entities out there. We're going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about our ending fund balances and moving forward from that perspective. The last thing that I'd like to share with the team is the city manager, myself, and the council president met on Monday. We're looking at a part of our strategic plan that talks about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and coming up with a committee. And it just points us so critical that that committee needs to get up and on its feet. We need to have a community conversation. So we're going to be talking more about that. And I think in place, we're very cognizant that we want to talk about the bigger topics around those 3 areas. And so, but part of that will be a community conversation that we will be having come over the next 2 months. So I just wanted to share that and bring everyone up to speed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. It's a great update. And thank you for your continued looking at the budget and what it means for your law enforcement and your health and safety. So I appreciate it. Mayor Wojtowski, what would you like to tell people in the community?
I don't have any new announcements at this time. Actually, I'm just going to continue to listen and see if anything sparks a new question.
Okay, that sounds good. School guidance is obviously something that everybody's wanting to know these days. So thank you for doing your part of that. And I also know Mayor Wojtowski asked about specific guidance around playgrounds, and we did receive that, and I believe I sent it to everybody, and it was mixed in with outdoor recreation guidance. So there wasn't a lot that was a surprise, though. Yeah. All right, great. Thank you very much. Mayor Keep, what would you like to tell people today?
Thank you. So I'll address the schools a little bit real quick. Yesterday morning, my boss, the director of our transportation, came into my office and we chatted a little bit, and he asked for me to look and find reopening plans from other districts across the country and see what others are doing and see what we can do without reinventing the wheel. And I will say I did a lot of looking, and there's not a lot out there that's public right now. I think the vast majority of school districts across the country are developing plans in-house and not making those public at this time. And I think you'll see more and more of that come in July. And so there was a lot of discussion about July. We'll be releasing our plans. And I know here in Salem Kaiser, that's kind of what our plan is as well, is in July, making it public and then having time to review it before submitting it to the health department and to the Department of Education. So, but having said that, I did look at the sample plans that were on the ODE webpage, which includes Newburgh School District for their middle school. And I would say those sample plans were probably some of the most comprehensive of the ones that I did see across the country. Boise School District in Idaho also has a really nice plan laid out with some pretty good details as well. So if people are looking what our school is looking at, I think those are some good places to go to get that type of information. And then, of course, every school is going to have to modify that to a certain extent to meet their needs and abilities. So, so I think that's kind of where we're at from a school standpoint. As far as the topics that were up for discussion, yeah, you know, I am very concerned about the special session and what was brought up and the framework of how it looks like it's going. Of course, that's yet to be determined completely. And I understand the importance of the policing issues. And I'm all for continually looking at what our policies and procedures are and trying to find better ways to do that. My concern a little bit is, are we rushing into it and trying to do something just to do something? Or are we doing it meaningful and in a way that's going to bring about positive change? And so I would probably prefer that we kind of slow down a little bit on that and actually look at what is going to bring about good positive change and do that in a constructive way instead of pushing some stuff through. You know, and so some of the things, you know, that was on that list was like outlying chokeholds for police. And I think that's an example, you know, it's kind of a key phrase, but from everything I've seen and read and talking with police departments across Oregon over my time as mayor, you know, nobody uses chokeholds. So, you know, outlawing something that's not used is kind of I mean, I can see the purpose of that. Certainly it's good to move forward in those directions sometimes, but what is the message that we're sending also, and how can we send that in a positive direction for all people involved? Because I know all the officers I've ever talked with, they work their tails off and they care an awful lot. And so I think slowing down sometimes can be a good thing. And so, and then of course, I would prefer if we're going to have a special session to make it a little bit more focused and not quite as broad as what it looks like might be coming down the line. So, but as far as the city of Amity goes, you know, we're just plugging along. We're continuing to work on our water infrastructure improvement projects. We do have some notices out asking residents to kind of conserve their water. We're looking at some of the work right now at our reservoir and some difficulty with aging valves and pipes and trying to work through those. And so our contractors are working hard. Our staff is working hard to keep that on time and hopefully under budget so that we can keep moving forward. So that's, I think, all I've kind of got today. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mayor. And then I'd like to, we have at least one person who's new. Oh, yes. Representative Gomberg has a question or a comment.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I've been hearing comments and questions through this meeting. And I'm hopeful that you might be able to encourage Representative Noble to join us on our next gathering and to offer some perspective on particularly this group of bills that we have been talking about here. If I'm not mistaken, at least one of the bills was considered in the last session, and he was a chief co-sponsor of that proposal. So he would be in a good position, I hope, to talk about the context as well as the specifics.
Thank you, Representative Gomberg. I agree that it would be great to have him join us. So I was halfway through a text. But I think I did text Commissioner Jacobson while we were on our last conversation. And then we were able to confirm that our HHS director was way ahead of us. And she had already reached out last Tuesday to Lincoln County's HHS director. So I was really glad to hear that. Okay. Great, thank you very much, and I'll be sure to invite him and remind him of that invitation. But what I was about to say was that we have at least one new person on, plus a dog, and that is Jodi Hansen, who is the director of Remnant Initiatives, which helps mentor folks who are returning from the Department of Corrections facilities back into Yamhill County. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure first that Councillor Drabkin has an update on the YCAP moteling project. And then I'm going to go to Jodi Hansen for an update on what it's like for folks coming out of DOC right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the moteling program, as it's currently going, has funding levels that will take it into this July. And YCAP is beginning to assess what winding down would look like. And actually, I just transcribed my notes and sent them to the group. So let me read from those instead of my handwritten ones. Okay, so the current level of funding will take the program into July. In that assessment of what winding down will look like, more shelter beds will definitely be needed. And there needs to be some acknowledgement as well that if this program ends, a percentage of people will absolutely exit back to the street. To continue the program, YCAP would need additional staffing support and monies. The moteling program has really served as a snapshot of how a navigational center could operate in McMinnville. This moteling program, I'm going to use this word here. If you were paying, if you were part of the conversations that were happening around low barrier shelter in McMinnville, there was a lot of confusion around that over the last couple of years. This moteling program is a low barrier shelter. So at this point, we need to be asking ourselves, what does our community, and I do mean our Yamhill County community, need most? A navigational center or a low barrier shelter? And I would say that this program has been a good reflection of how those two are kind of blended. The low barrier shelter acts as a sort of navigational center because there are pathways out, as opposed to just being someplace that people go and stay on an as needed basis. Since our last meeting, 12 new households have been served, more seniors have been served, and there's an extensive stat sheet that YCAP released with a lot more demographic information that's very interesting. What YCAP also needs from the community is we need more one-bedroom apartments, especially first floor units. There are a number of disabled people that are homeless where stairs are just not an option. And generally, we need more housing. We have some applications are complete. We have people ready to move into housing. But if a lot of our rental units don't accept anybody that has any criminal history. So that is one of the reasons people are getting denied housing and unable to leave the moteling program. So we need more rentals. Our moteling program has an almost 40% success rate of exit to permanent housing, and that's really good. It's a very high success rate, especially because many of these people would not have succeeded in a typical shelter situation. We have one person that is a veteran that's been in the YCAP service circle for 2 years and was never able to be placed into housing, and the stability of the moteling program allowed them the rest and the resources they need to get into housing. We also have one person that previously was residing, if you will, on Dustin Court that has been in YCAP's purview since that ended, so at least a year. Because of the moteling program, they were able to get them into permanent housing. And there's many, many more examples. And then that permanent housing looks like moving through YCAP shelters, but also into housing authority programs, using disability vouchers, vets vouchers, things like that. YCAP continues to partner with a number of different individual organizations, all part of the Shelter Collaborative. And that consolidated effort is keeping people from falling through the cracks and back into houselessness. Another quick example would be somebody whose housing was being provided through the Willamette Valley Cancer Foundation, who's actively receiving treatment. And without the partnership of YCAP and Willamette Valley Cancer Foundation, that person would have been receiving treatment and homeless, but they were able to keep them in housing. Currently, there's no additional state funding to continue this program. Staffing will continue to be a consideration if there's an effort to continue the program. And also, if we're thinking about it and where it falls in terms of that navigational center versus low barrier shelter, OHCS released a report that demonstrates that a day center component is a key component to make any navigational center successful, because that's when people do business and that's when people need to be able to get documents, etc. So that's on the moteling program. On the rent relief program, I reported here that YCAP received $1.3 million from the E-Board. That is federal money that came from the CARES Act, and YCAP has begun distributing those monies already. In the last 2 weeks, 94 households have already come through the program. 65 more are in the intake process. Of all of those, 32 have already been served, and there is no waiting list. So far, YCAP has distributed $73,000 into Yamhill County. That's mostly in rental arrears and rental stabilization for households for the next 6 months. And it's important to note, I don't have a specific stat on this, but most of these people had jobs that they lost due to COVID. That's one of the qualifiers. So if the job loss, they're in a housing insecure place because of COVID, if they're in this program. For most of them, this is the first time ever that they're asking for government assistance, and they're asking because there's no promise of their job coming back. Also, people coming into that program are connected to service providers for mental health, employment, and energy resources. And one thing people may not know is there is a lot of money out there for energy assistance that is not being applied for. There's been almost no uptick for requests in energy assistance dollars. If you want more information on any or all of that, please visit the YCAP website. There's online applications for just about all of it, any door, Yamhill. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. There's a lot happening with YCAP, so it's really exciting to see this project that got stood up really quickly, and thank you to the city of McMinnville and the city of Newburgh for joining in that. And since we have two board members of YCAP on as well, thank you all for your work for YCAP. And it's a perfect segue to Jodi Hansen. What would you like to tell people in the community and also here on the call?
So just a little bit of context, Remnant Initiatives, where I serve as the executive director, we have been operating as a formal 501c3 nonprofit, blah, 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 since the end of 2017. beginning of 2018. Prior to that, myself and just some friends in the community, we assisted folks re-enter from our prison system back into the neighborhood on an informal basis. So I've been at this since about 2011. And our focus is making sure that people who release from our prison system are successful and achieve sustainable self-sufficiency, can pay their taxes, don't commit another crime, reunify with their families, and contribute to our community. Because most crime is repeat crime. And if we fail to help these people be successful, then we will continue to suffer from unhealthy and unsafe neighborhoods. So what I would like to share is kind of some history going from April 1st to the present. So little context, when people release from prison, generally, if they don't have safe family and friends, they're put on a bus, they're sent back here to McMinnville, and they are required to meet with their parole officer on the day that they release. And then they have to navigate all the services between getting their SNAP benefits, getting an ID at the DMV, if in fact they have the funds to do that, et cetera, et cetera. And so we help people to navigate all of those things. And on a good day, it's hard work. COVID has really created a lot of difficulties, starting with the fact that we really have one safe and sober transitional housing option where folks generally release right from the prisons back into, and that's Helping Hands. Helping Hands has 65 beds. And when the governor issued the stay-at-home order, Helping Hands just shut down to any new intakes, period. So all of a sudden, the Department of Community Justice, with whom Remnant Initiatives collaborates very closely, and also our programs, we're scrambling, where are we going to put people when they release from prison? Also, there was a lot of, I'm going to be nice and say that there was a lot of denial on the part of the Department of Corrections about their ability to be able to control the spread of the disease. Personally, I have a background as a public health nurse many years ago, and I also have done a lot of work within the Department of Corrections. I've seen those dorms, I see what conditions are like, and I see that social distancing in most of our prisons, especially those that are older, is pretty much impossible to maintain. And so on end of March, Oregon State Prison reported that they had some staff with confirmed cases of COVID-19. And by April 2nd, Santiam Correctional Institution had the first case of COVID-19 in an AIC, or an adult in custody. We don't use the term inmate anymore in this business. So that was April 1st. As far as Yamhill County is concerned, we had no housing. We're seeing an increase in prevalence within certain prisons. And then by the beginning of May, the Oregon Health Authority intervened and said no more putting people on buses and sending them through public transportation to get back into their communities if they were coming from a high prevalence institution. And we had 3 high prevalence institutions at that point: Shutter Creek, OSP, and then Santiam as well. And so I have to say it was chaos. It was crazy, but it was a great testimony to the collaborative relationships within this community when Director Beach from the Department of Community Justice, Lindsay Manfred, Amber Miller at Yamhill County Public Health, the folks at Helping Hands, and Kay Sawyer at the Yamhill County Gospel Rescue Mission, and the folks at Virginia Garcia were able to pull together with impending releases, because we cannot constitutionally tell people you have to stay in prison until you're healthy. And so we pulled together our brains, resources, experience, and whatnot, and put together a protocol whereby we now have a mechanism for getting people out of high prevalence institutions where the Oregon Health Authority is requiring that they be hoteled for 2 weeks. And Helping Hands is requiring that they have a negative COVID-19 test prior to allowing them to come into their houses. And so we have a pretty complex and collaborative relationship whereby Remnant Initiatives is using our volunteers to provide food, working with local churches, working with fish here, the food bank here in Newburgh, and food banks in McMinnville. So it's been crazy. It's been a whirlwind, but there are a lot of forces, both government and non-government organizations, both faith-based and not faith-based organizations, that have really been working hard in the past few weeks to ensure that we don't bring anybody into the county who has active coronavirus, and then set them free in community to be homeless or what else, which also happens when people release from the Department of Corrections. This is a really, I mean, on a good day without the virus, it's really important for us to recognize that the output of our criminal justice system, and that's people reentering community, is a very vulnerable human population, and also a very expensive population. I would say probably some of our most expensive citizens when you look at what they cost the community. And I would agree with the mayor in Amity that being careful about how you defund one public service to then fund others is important. But because I do a lot of research and a lot of writing around this topic of the output of our criminal justice system, people returning to our neighborhoods, I would say a bit of history there is that in the 80s and the 90s, local law enforcement actually was one of the greatest resistors to the federal government's launching of the war on drugs. Local law enforcement during the 80s and the 90s said drug addiction is not a law enforcement problem. Drug addiction is a public health problem, and it should be in the purview of public health. And as I talk with folks in law enforcement, they kind of take a deep sigh of relief to think that maybe reorienting what their job really is in the way of public safety and putting drug addiction and homelessness and mental health response and the things that we're asking the police departments to do now, which is so much, to say that, yeah, if we need to fund other things to be able to have folks get the right kind of care that they need at the right time, then this might be the time to do it. But yes, Mayor, I totally agree that this has got to be done with some intentionality as we move forward. But I'm fond of giving people that history lesson because it feels like all of a sudden we're saying, let's do something that law enforcement doesn't want, when in fact what we're doing is going back to pre-war on drugs, tough on crime thinking that we went through in the 80s and the 90s and still live with today. But we're kind of reorienting ourselves back into something that was different in the past. I want to kind of dovetail off of some of the things that Councillor Drabkin said regarding housing in the community, because that is one of the greatest challenges for our population. Both early release transitional housing is a major challenge, but the bigger challenge, I think, is when folks have been doing their work, they are cleaning up the wreckage of their criminal past. They are ready to re-enter society. And because they have a criminal record, it's very difficult for a landlord to be willing to rent to them, especially in such a tight rental market. And so our volunteers, we do a lot of work advocating, explaining to landlords exactly what the nature of the criminal charges when they do a criminal background check on somebody who does have criminal history mean, because all assaults are not created equal, all sex offenses are not created equal, all gun charges are not created equal, all drug charges are not created equal. There's always a story behind what's on paper of someone's criminal record. And we have had great success in having one-on-one conversations with landlords, working with the Department of Community Justice. Many landlords are willing to take a chance on our folks if they have a red letter from the PO, a letter from me and our organization and whatnot, and getting people with criminal histories stably housed, who many times have the income and the wherewithal to be great renters. They're very committed to being a great tenant because they have a lot of options if that doesn't work out for them. And so I would say that having some sort of a navigator or a navigation center is really important in that it's very complex to figure out who has what at any given time that can assist someone in achieving sustainable self-sufficiency. I spend a lot of time on the phone trying to navigate between HIAC and YCAP, and then private landlords and other resources within the community advocating for our population. And there are some days I'm fond of saying, I'm a smart woman who's run multi-million-dollar businesses, who has a master's degree, and I can't figure this out. So if there's a way to get somebody there to create some sort of centralized assistance, you get my thumbs up and my vote for that. Yeah, I think that's probably what I want to say, Casey. If I'm missing anything, because you and I've had a lot of conversations, just chime in. And so.
No, thank you. I think that you got a good update for people who are here on the call and people in the community who really don't know, who may never have even thought about the fact that people return from the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, 95%, actually it's over 95% depending on the day and the state, of everyone that we incarcerate returns right back to the neighborhood where they committed their crime. That's the law. So.
Yes, thank you. And Councillor Drabkin has a question for you, but I also want to make sure there's some folks who have had to jump onto 2 p.m. calls, and we're getting close to that moment. So Councillor Drabkin, do you mind if I move on and we can circle back? Okay, great. Abisha Stone would love to tell us apparently something particularly interesting, and then I want to make sure that Shannon Buckmaster, who is quoted in the newspaper this week based upon the roundtable, gets some thoughts in.
Nice, wonderful. Well, thank you, Commissioner, and also thank you, Jodi. First of all, for the work you do. I'm really committed to the mission of your organization and for your perspective on what's going on. So I will just kind of cover my top 3 right now. First of all, I wanted to make sure folks are aware of the fact that SEDCOR, we're still hosting our monthly, lunches, but without lunch. So we're now doing our monthly forum lunches via webinar. And on July 8th, I wanted to share with you the topic of discussion is we're actually going to have some industry partners as panelists. These are manufacturing partners who pivoted midstream and started making PPE and or serving emergency needs, food being one of those as well. And we're going to have 4 of those businesses serving on our panel. I won't name who they are because I'm getting some final confirmations, but I think it will be a really interesting panel, and also we'll have a nice robust Q&A opportunity at the end. We have an opportunity to talk about how these businesses feel about the support they have or maybe feel they haven't received from the programs available through local government and the federal government, and hopefully talk about it in a meaningful way, a productive way, right? So as additional funds come and resources, how do those need to be applied? So just wanted to remind folks, sedcor.com. You can find access to all of these webinars. We're unlimiting it. They are free at this point. So the next one is July 8th. So the good news and the interesting stuff I wanted to share is I have been updating this group on a weekly basis about the regional funding that we have been trying to secure through not just SEDCOR, but several regional partners like the Council of Governments, Willamette Workforce Partnership, our partners at Marion and Polk counties. And so I wanted to let you know that to date, we have now secured $457,000 that we will be able to use to stand up another business grant program. Thank you, Mayor Heel. I'm very excited about this. I know some of you knew that our first asks and first go-rounds fell a little shy, and we were hopeful to get enough funding to stand up another program. So depending on timing for funds, we're hoping to see another business relief grant program for small businesses affected by COVID-19, especially those that have still not been able to get resources by any other means. This grant program will be hosted by Willamette Workforce Partnership and hopefully will be stood up in July. Also, I've heard a few of you talking about housing on this call, so I brought this to the top of my list. I don't know how many of you are aware, but in Newburgh, we have a workforce housing consortium that came together, started to come together probably about maybe 6 months ago now. I'm looking for a nod maybe from Shannon. And we really started getting into it and getting active right before COVID started. This is a group of public and private partners that are trying to put together a workforce housing project. And one of the things that we have been doing is staying very connected to our state representatives and our local kind of state folks. And we are all very concerned about state funding. What's going to happen? What's going to be on the chopping block? What's up for being cut? There are multiple projects like this, not just workforce housing, various other housing projects. We also have businesses that have been partnering with the state for their grant programs, such as the HIOP, High Impact Opportunity projects, innovation projects, and currently everything is on hold. And as funds go to provide much needed relief related to COVID-19, I just want to put out there that these sort of housing projects, as we've just heard from multiple panelists, hit multiple levels. So I'm hoping that our representatives who are on the call are hearing our call for support, and we'll continue to push for that at SEDCOR as well. And with that, I will be done so we can move on. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for all that great information. And I would say, let's have some questions, but we're up against 2 o'clock, and I'd love to hear from Shannon Buckmaster.
Thank you. I'm actually just going to dive into a quick federal update just to confirm the changes to PPP. So this is the payroll funding. 4 quick adjustments that just came from the federal level moving down. Number 1, the time to spend funds has now been adjusted from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, recognizing that we underestimated how long this would last. Secondly, the amount has been lowered that needs to be spent on payroll. It was at 75% of PPP funds needed to go to payroll. Now it's down to 60%. So there's a little more flexibility, and what you can also hear in that is maybe an opportunity for overhead costs or operational costs as well. The deadline has also been extended to restore full-time employment and payroll funds or payroll expenses. The deadline was June 30th. It's now December 31st, 2020. So we have a 6-month extension. Essentially, we're seeing all of our federal practices roll out to the end of the year, which also should put you in a mindset for safety and business practices, where and how you should be preparing. We're talking about December, folks, collectively. And then finally, the repayment terms have been reset for loans made after June 4th. They've been set for 5 years as a repayment. That being said, I'm going to keep it short because I really believe what Councillor Drapkin and Jodi Hansen, our guest, have been saying is really important. This is a conversation that needs to continue, and we really do, at least from economic development, we need to recognize that this is housing, this is job, this is healthcare, this is other expenses that are being pulled from critical areas to address an issue that we could collectively come together as a community to be really creative about. So Jodi, thank you for sharing. I think Councillor Drapkin dropped off, but thank you for bringing this into our conversation. And apparently I need to read the paper.
I don't know. It's kind of fun to see quotes from Commissioner Olson and Shannon Buckmaster in the paper. So
hopefully I said something intelligent.
Oh yeah, it was like maybe a little bit controversial, a little bit push, but Commissioner Olson's was a little bit push too.
Okay, I'm reading the paper. It was delivered to the office. I am not in the office clearly, so.
Perfect. I want to go to Diane McLaren next for an update from Chemeketa Community College, but I also like to note that while we were on our call, let's see, I got Senator Boquist sent me the daily update. It was the News Register. It sent the daily update and also the list of bills. So there we go. All right, Diane McLaren, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
Good afternoon. Well, I just wanted Mayor Cape to see that Chemeketa will not be offering driver's ed classes this summer. So sorry. I already updated you that we are going remotely for summer and fall terms, except for some various CTE classes. And also we, in order to cut costs, classified and exempt staff will be taking Fridays off as furlough days for the next 10 weeks. So starting this Friday, so I will be unable to join you all on Fridays during that time. But that is, to help us cut costs for the college.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us once a week. So we really appreciate that. Okay, great. We've made it through everybody. Are there any last minute comments or questions? And I really appreciate Abhisha, some good news and some challenges. And I'm with you on that, manufacturers. Let's get them actually making stuff for everybody. Yeah. Okay. Well, if there are no more, thank you all. Be safe out there. And for the folks who are listening onto the call, remember, it's better to be outside than inside. Wear a mask whenever possible. Keep your distance from other people. We really need to make sure that in the long term, we can continue with our phase 2 opening for everybody, for their mental health and for their business and economic and financial health. And we can only do that when we help reduce the transmission of the virus. But with that, I really appreciate everybody being here, and we will see you on Friday, except for Diane. All right, see you on Friday. Thank you, everybody.